Welcome to Born into Light. Before you do anything else today, just pause for a moment. Take a slow breath, not because something dramatic is about to happen, but because sometimes the most important messages are the quiet ones. The kind that arrive when life has already been teaching you something for a while and you're only now beginning to see it clearly. If you have been feeling different lately, there is a reason for that. Not different in a loud way, not in a way that makes you feel bigger than anyone else, but different in a quieter, deeper way. The kind of difference that shows up in small moments, in the way you respond to things that once pulled strong reactions out of you. Maybe you have noticed that certain situations that used to drain you no longer have the same power over your emotions. Conversations that once would have kept you replaying words in your head all night now pass through you more gently. And even though part of you still remembers the old reactions, something inside you has begun choosing a calmer path. That kind of change does not happen overnight. It grows slowly, often in silence, often in moments where no one else sees the effort it takes to pause instead of reacting, to listen instead of defending, or to walk away instead of proving a point. And sometimes that growth can feel a little lonely, because when you begin outgrowing old patterns, you also begin noticing how many of those patterns used to shape your world. The arguments that once felt important suddenly feel heavy. The need to explain yourself to everyone begins to lose its grip. The constant urge to be understood by people who never truly listened starts to fade, not because you stopped caring, but because something deeper started guiding you. When did you first begin noticing that shift? When did peace start feeling more valuable than being right? There is a moment in personal growth that many people experience quietly without even realizing how meaningful it is. It is the moment when you stop trying to win every emotional battle and start protecting your inner balance instead. That moment changes everything. Because strength begins to look different. It no longer looks like raising your voice or proving your worth through constant effort. Instead, it begins to look like restraint, like patience, like the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs every situation to validate who they are. You may have noticed that some people around you do not fully understand this version of you yet. They might expect the same reactions they used to receive. They might wait for the old arguments, the old defenses, the old emotional cycles to return. But something inside you has already moved forward, and even if you cannot perfectly explain it, you know you cannot go back to who you were before. Growth rarely feels dramatic from the inside. Most of the time it feels like subtle decisions repeated over and over again. Choosing calm when frustration appears. Choosing reflection when anger tries to take over. Choosing silence when you realize that not every moment requires your voice. And slowly, almost quietly, a new version of you begins to take shape. Not louder, not harder, just steadier. Have you noticed how certain things that once felt urgent now feel distant? How the need to prove your worth has softened into a quieter sense of knowing? How you sometimes catch yourself observing situations instead of immediately reacting to them? These are not small changes. They are signs that something within you has matured in a way that only life experience can create. There was a time when you may have believed that strength meant pushing harder, speaking louder, or standing your ground in every situation that challenged you. But the deeper truth that many people eventually discover is that real strength often arrives quietly. It shows up in the ability to walk away from what no longer feels aligned. It shows up in the patience to let people misunderstand you without needing to correct every assumption, and it shows up in the calm realization that your peace is not something that needs to be negotiated with the outside world. When did you start feeling that? When did you begin realizing that protecting your inner calm mattered more than proving your point? These questions are not meant to rush you toward answers. They are simply gentle reminders that the changes you have been feeling are not random. They are the natural result of someone who has lived, reflected, struggled, and slowly begun outgrowing the older versions of themselves. And if today feels a little quieter than the past, if you notice that your reactions have softened, if you find yourself choosing peace in places where conflict once felt automatic, then maybe this moment right here is simply the quiet confirmation that something inside you has already begun changing in a very real way. And the truth is, the person you are becoming now may not need to fight as hard as the person you used to be. Because the strength you are growing into is not the loud kind. It is the kind that sits calmly within you and simply refuses to return to who you once were. If this message is meeting you at the right moment in your day, you may gently subscribe to Born into Light and like the video so this space can keep reaching hearts that need calm. And if it resonates with where you are right now, share a quiet reflection in the comments by typing, "I choose peace today." There is a quiet moment that comes with that realization. Not a moment of celebration, not a moment where everything suddenly feels perfect, but a moment where you recognize that something inside you has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. You start seeing things differently. Situations that once pulled you into emotional storms now appear almost distant, as if you're watching them from the outside instead of standing in the middle of them. The same words, the same attitudes, the same patterns might still exist around you, but they no longer land in the same place within your heart. And sometimes that can feel confusing, because part of you remembers the version of yourself that used to react quickly, the version that felt the need to explain, defend, or prove something every time tension appeared. That version of you was not wrong. It was simply the version of you that existed before you understood certain things about life. Before you understood that not every reaction deserves your energy. Before you understood that some people will only meet you at the level they are ready for. Before you understood that your peace is something that grows stronger the less you try to force others to understand it. Growth often looks like this. It looks like sitting with emotions instead of immediately acting on them. It looks like noticing your thoughts without letting every one of them guide your behavior. And sometimes it looks like letting silence do the work that words once tried to accomplish. Have you noticed how different that feels? There was a time when silence might have felt uncomfortable. It might have felt like losing, like giving up, or like letting someone else take control of the moment. But now, silence sometimes feels like clarity. It feels like choosing not to carry what no longer belongs to you. It feels like stepping out of cycles that once repeated themselves again and again. And when you step out of those cycles, something interesting happens. You begin to see how many of your old reactions were shaped by the environment around you. The expectations, the misunderstandings, the pressure to constantly explain yourself to people who were never truly listening. But once you become aware of that, the old patterns begin to loosen their grip. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because your relationship with it changes. You begin responding instead of reacting. You begin observing instead of absorbing. And little by little you begin trusting your own inner steadiness more than the noise around you. That kind of trust is not built in a single moment. It forms slowly, through experiences that challenge you, and through reflections that happen long after the moment has passed. Sometimes you only recognize your growth when you look back and realize how differently you would have handled the same situation a year ago. Think about that for a moment. Who were you 1 year ago? How did you respond to frustration then? How quickly did emotions take control of your actions? And now, how often do you pause first? That pause is powerful. It is the space where awareness lives. It is the small moment where the old version of you and the growing version of you meet, and for the first time, you begin choosing the direction you want to go instead of being carried by habit. And that is not always easy, because sometimes growth means letting go of identities you carried for a long time. The version of yourself that always fought back. The version that needed to be understood. The version that believed every misunderstanding had to be corrected immediately. But now something inside you understands a quieter truth. Not every misunderstanding needs to be fixed. Not every relationship needs to follow you into the next chapter of your life. Not every situation deserves access to your peace. And that realization does not make you distant or cold. It simply means you are learning where your energy belongs. There is a certain calm that begins to appear when someone reaches this stage of growth. A calm that is not based on life becoming perfect, but on the deep understanding that you no longer need to carry every emotional weight that passes by. You start choosing what stays within you. You start recognizing what is yours to hold and what was never meant for you in the first place. And once you see that clearly, it becomes harder and harder to return to the version of yourself that once carried everything at once. Because now you know the difference between reacting and responding. You know the difference between proving and simply being. You know the difference between noise and peace. And somewhere along the way, without announcing it, without forcing it, without trying to become someone else, you quietly began becoming someone steadier than you were before. And the interesting thing about becoming steadier is that it rarely feels dramatic while it is happening. From the outside, your life might look almost the same. The same routines, the same places, the same people moving through your days. But inside, something has shifted in a way that changes how everything touches you. Moments that once felt overwhelming now move through you with more space around them. You notice emotions rising, but instead of being swept away by them, you can sit beside them for a moment. You can observe them, understand them, and sometimes even let them pass without turning them into a story that lasts the rest of the day. That kind of awareness is quiet, but it is powerful. It is the kind of strength that does not need to prove itself. And when you begin living from that place, something else slowly begins to change. Your attention becomes more intentional. Instead of giving your energy to every distraction, every opinion, every misunderstanding, you begin placing your attention where it actually matters. You start noticing what brings you a sense of calm. You notice the conversations that feel genuine instead of draining. You notice the environments where your thoughts feel clear instead of crowded. And without forcing it, you begin leaning toward those spaces more often. At the same time, you might find yourself gently stepping back from things that once filled your time, not with anger, not with resentment, just with the quiet understanding that you have grown past them. And sometimes that realization can bring mixed emotions. Because even when you outgrow something, it does not mean it was meaningless. It simply means it belonged to a different chapter of your life. There is a certain maturity that comes from recognizing that. The ability to look back at who you were without shame, to see the ways you once reacted without judging yourself for it, to understand that every stage of your life carried lessons that helped shape the person you are now becoming, and that person, the one you are slowly becoming, is learning something very important. You are learning that peace is not something you chase, it is something you allow. It appears in the spaces where you stop forcing outcomes. It grows in the moments where you allow yourself to step away from the need to control how everything unfolds. You begin trusting that your role is not to manage every reaction around you. Your role is simply to remain honest with yourself, to remain aware of how you feel, to remain grounded in the kind of person you want to be, even when the world around you moves in ways you cannot predict. When did that realization begin to take root for you? When did you first notice that your energy felt too valuable to spend on the same arguments, the same explanations, the same cycles that once filled so much of your time? There is something quietly freeing about that moment. It is the moment when you stop trying to convince the world of who you are and start living in a way that speaks for itself, not loudly, not forcefully, but clearly. Your presence becomes calmer. Your reactions become slower and more thoughtful. And people may not always understand why you have changed, but deep down you know that this shift did not happen randomly. It happened because you paid attention to yourself. You listened when your mind needed rest. You noticed when your heart felt heavy. You began asking deeper questions about what truly matters in your life. And the more honest you became with those questions, the more your priorities began to change. Things that once felt urgent started losing their intensity. Things that once felt distant began feeling more meaningful. Simple moments started holding more value than constant activity, a quiet morning, a thoughtful conversation, a moment where you can breathe without feeling rushed. These things start to feel like small anchors of peace in a world that often moves too fast. And the more you recognize their importance, the more carefully you begin protecting them. not because you are withdrawing from life, but because you are learning how to live it with intention. That is a kind of strength that many people do not talk about. It is the strength of someone who no longer needs constant noise to feel alive. The strength of someone who can sit with their own thoughts without needing to escape them. The strength of someone who understands that growth does not always look like moving faster. Sometimes it looks like slowing down enough to see clearly. And if you are noticing that change in yourself lately, if you are sensing that your reactions are softer and your awareness is deeper, then perhaps this moment right now is simply another quiet step in that direction. Not a finish line, not a final version of who you will be. Just another peaceful moment where you recognize that the person you are becoming is learning how to carry life differently, with a little more patience, a little more understanding, and a quiet kind of strength that no longer needs to announce itself to anyone. Because when strength becomes quiet, something else begins to happen within you. You stop measuring your life by how loudly you are heard or how quickly you respond to everything around you. Instead, you begin noticing the quality of your inner world, the tone of your thoughts, the way your heart feels when you move through the day, and slowly you begin valuing calm more than stimulation. Not because life has become empty, but because you have started recognizing the difference between noise and meaning. There was a time when constant activity might have felt necessary. Conversations, reactions, explanations, trying to stay ahead of misunderstandings or expectations. It was exhausting in ways you might not have fully noticed at the time, but now something inside you prefers space. Space to think, space to observe, space to simply exist without feeling like you have to prove something in every moment. And when you allow yourself that space, a deeper kind of clarity begins to appear. You begin understanding your own patterns with more honesty. You see the ways you once tried to earn acceptance by overextending yourself. You recognize how often you gave energy to situations that never truly nourished you in return. That awareness can be humbling, but it is also freeing, because once you see those patterns clearly, you are no longer controlled by them in the same way. Instead of repeating them automatically, you begin choosing differently. You begin choosing rest when your mind needs quiet. You begin choosing distance when something feels heavy. You begin choosing honesty with yourself, even when that honesty asks you to step away from familiar habits. And little by little, the life you move through begins to feel lighter. Not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer carrying so many invisible expectations. There is something deeply peaceful about that stage of growth. It is the stage where you stop chasing constant validation and begin listening to your own inner steadiness instead. When did that start happening for you? When did you begin noticing that your worth no longer needed to be proven through endless effort? When did you start feeling that quiet sense of enoughness inside yourself? These questions do not demand immediate answers. They are simply reflections, small lights that help you see the path you have already walked, because the truth is, growth often happens so gradually that we barely notice it while it is unfolding. One day, you simply realize that you are not the same person you used to be. You react less, you listen more, you think before speaking, you allow situations to pass without absorbing every emotion they carry. And while others may not always recognize the depth of that change, you can feel it within yourself. It feels like steadiness, like your feet are finally touching the ground in a way they did not before. And in that steadiness, something very gentle begins to grow. Self-trust. The quiet confidence that you can move through life without needing to control every outcome. The understanding that even when things are uncertain, you are capable of meeting those moments with awareness instead of panic. That trust changes the way you experience the world. You begin allowing life to unfold instead of constantly trying to force it. You begin giving yourself permission to grow at your own pace. You begin understanding that becoming who you are meant to be is not a race, and it was never meant to look like anyone else's journey. It is simply a process, a slow unfolding, a quiet deepening of awareness that continues with each passing season of your life. And maybe today, this moment right now, is simply another gentle reminder of how far you have already come. Not in ways that need to be celebrated loudly. Not in ways that need recognition from others. but in the quiet understanding that the person you were a year ago would probably look at you now and notice something different, something calmer, something steadier, something that no longer feels the need to rush into every emotional storm. And maybe the most meaningful part of all of this is that you did not arrive here by forcing yourself to change. You arrived here by paying attention, by reflecting, by slowly choosing awareness over reaction again and again until those choices became part of who you are. And if that quiet awareness continues to grow within you, then perhaps the path ahead does not need to be forced at all. Perhaps it will simply continue unfolding step by step as you keep moving forward with that same calm presence, allowing yourself to become more fully who you already are becoming. And when you reach that place within yourself, something subtle begins to settle. You no longer feel the same urgency to rush through your own life. The pressure to constantly become something else begins to soften, and in its place comes a quiet acceptance of where you are right now. Not a passive acceptance, but a grounded one, the kind that understands growth is not only about moving forward. Sometimes it is about pausing long enough to recognize what has already changed within you. Because if you look closely, you may begin to see that the person you are today handles life with a different rhythm. Your thoughts have more space between them. Your emotions move more gently through your awareness. Even the way you observe the world feels calmer than it once did. This is what often happens when someone begins to mature emotionally. Life does not suddenly become simple, but your relationship with it becomes steadier. You stop resisting every uncomfortable moment. You stop interpreting every challenge as something personal. Instead, you begin seeing experiences as moments that pass through your life, each carrying something to learn, something to understand, and sometimes something to release. And when you learn how to release things properly, your heart becomes lighter. Old frustrations slowly lose their hold. Memories that once carried sharp edges begin to soften with time. And the need to revisit certain chapters of your past begins to fade. Not because those chapters did not matter, but because they already gave you what they were meant to give. There is a quiet maturity in recognizing that, in allowing the past to rest where it belongs, in allowing yourself to move forward without dragging old emotions into every new day. That is not forgetting, that is healing. And healing often shows itself in very ordinary ways. You may notice that you no longer feel the same urge to revisit conversations that once hurt you. You may notice that certain names, places, or memories no longer stir the same emotions they once did. And instead of holding on to those feelings, you allow them to pass through you like distant echoes of a time that has already shaped you enough. That is the quiet work of emotional growth. It is rarely visible from the outside. But within you, something becomes more stable with every experience you process honestly. You become more patient with yourself. You become more understanding of others. And perhaps most importantly, you begin forgiving the earlier versions of yourself who were simply doing the best they could with the awareness they had at the time. That kind of forgiveness is powerful, because once you stop fighting your past, you begin freeing your present. You stop replaying every mistake. You stop measuring yourself against who you think you should have been. And instead, you begin respecting the path that brought you here. When did you begin seeing your own journey with that kind of understanding? When did you begin realizing that your past was not something to be ashamed of, but something that quietly prepared you for the awareness you now carry? These are the moments where inner peace begins to deepen, not because life has given you every answer, but because you have learned how to live with questions without letting them disturb your center. You become comfortable with not knowing everything, comfortable with letting certain things unfold in their own time, comfortable with trusting that growth continues even during the quiet seasons of your life. And those quiet seasons are often more meaningful than they appear, because beneath the surface, your mind is integrating lessons. Your heart is releasing old tensions. Your perspective is widening in ways that slowly reshape how you see the world. You begin noticing the small things more clearly. The calm in a quiet morning, the comfort of a genuine conversation, the sense of grounding that comes from simply sitting with your thoughts without needing to escape them. These moments might seem simple, but they carry a kind of depth that only appears after someone has walked through enough life to appreciate them. And perhaps that is where you are now, not at the beginning of your journey, not at the end of it either, but somewhere in the middle where experience has softened certain edges of your personality and strengthened the parts of you that matter most. You know more about yourself now than you once did. You understand your boundaries more clearly. You recognize your emotions sooner, and you have begun learning how to treat your own inner world with the same patience you once tried to give everyone else. That is a quiet form of wisdom. It does not arrive with announcements. It arrives slowly, through reflection and through the honest moments when you choose growth over habit. And if you sit with yourself for a moment right now, if you allow the noise of the outside world to settle just a little, you may begin to feel that calm presence within you again. That steady place inside your chest where everything slows down, where your thoughts no longer rush ahead of you, where your breath becomes deeper and your mind becomes clearer. That place has always been within you. But now, after everything you have lived through and everything you have slowly understood about yourself, you are finally learning how to return to it. And the more often you return to that quiet place within yourself, the more familiar it begins to feel. At first it may have seemed distant, almost like something you could only touch during rare moments of reflection. But over time, that calm presence begins to follow you into everyday life. You notice it while walking through ordinary parts of your day, while sitting in silence for a moment longer than usual, while observing your thoughts without rushing to change them. And slowly that inner stillness stops feeling like something you visit occasionally and begins feeling like something you carry with you. That is when a deeper shift begins. Because when someone starts living from that steadiness, their entire relationship with the world becomes more thoughtful. You stop rushing toward every opportunity. You stop reacting to every opinion. You stop allowing every passing emotion to define how your day unfolds. Instead, you begin choosing your responses with care, not in a rigid way, not in a way that suppresses your feelings, but in a way that respects the space between what happens around you and what you allow to live within you. That space is powerful. It is the place where wisdom grows, and many people never realize how important that space is because they spend their lives reacting immediately to everything that touches them. But you have begun noticing it. You have begun feeling that moment where a thought appears, and instead of letting it carry you away, you simply watch it for a second. You allow yourself to breathe. You allow yourself to decide. That small pause may seem simple, but it changes the direction of your life in ways that are difficult to see at first. Because every time you pause, instead of reacting automatically, you are shaping a different version of yourself. A version that is guided by awareness rather than impulse. A version that moves through life with more patience. A version that understands that emotional maturity is not about becoming distant, but about becoming clear. Clear about what matters, clear about what deserves your time, clear about the kind of energy you allow into your inner world. And the clearer you become, the more certain patterns begin to fall away naturally. You no longer feel drawn to the same emotional chaos that once surrounded you. You no longer feel the need to involve yourself in every disagreement or every misunderstanding that appears in your environment. Instead, you begin recognizing when something is simply not meant for your attention anymore, and there is a quiet relief in that realization. Because for so long, many people move through life believing they must respond to everything, every message, every tension, every opinion. But once you begin protecting your inner calm, you start understanding that attention is one of the most valuable things you have. Where you place it shapes how your life feels. Where you place it shapes how your mind moves. Where you place it shapes how your heart experiences the world around you. And that realization changes your priorities in very subtle ways. You begin giving more attention to moments that nourish you. Moments of quiet reflection. Moments of honest connection. Moments where you feel fully present instead of pulled in a dozen different directions. And the more you honor those moments, the more your life begins to feel aligned with who you are becoming. Not perfect, but genuine. And perhaps the most meaningful part of this stage of growth is that you stop searching so intensely for approval. You stop looking outside yourself for constant confirmation that you are on the right path. Because something deeper begins guiding you. A quiet sense of knowing that grows stronger the more you listen to it. It does not speak loudly, it does not demand attention. But when you slow down enough to notice it, it is always there, gently reminding you of what feels true. Have you felt that before? That subtle feeling when something within you simply knows which direction feels right, even if you cannot fully explain why. That is the voice many people spend their entire lives trying to hear. And the reason it becomes clearer over time is because you have been learning how to quiet everything that once drowned it out. You have been learning how to step away from noise, learning how to observe your thoughts instead of chasing every one of them, learning how to sit with yourself without needing constant distraction. And through all of that, something very real has begun to grow within you. A calm sense of presence, a quiet understanding of who you are becoming, a deeper respect for your own inner life. This kind of growth does not arrive all at once. It unfolds gradually, sometimes so gently that you only notice it when you look back at who you used to be. But the signs are there, in the way you handle difficult moments, in the way you allow certain things to pass without holding on to them, in the way you protect your peace without feeling the need to explain it to everyone around you. These are the quiet markers of someone who has matured internally, someone who has learned that strength is not always about pushing harder. Sometimes it is about standing calmly within yourself while the world moves around you. And maybe that is what this moment is really about. Not an urgent message in the dramatic sense, but a quiet reminder. A reminder that the changes you have been feeling within yourself are real. That the calm you have been slowly discovering is not accidental. That the person you are becoming is someone who understands life in a deeper, more patient way than before. And as you continue moving forward, step by step, day by day, that quiet understanding will continue guiding you softly, steadily, back to yourself. And maybe that is all this moment was meant to remind you of today. Not that everything in life has suddenly become clear, and not that every question has already been answered, but simply that you are no longer moving through the world in the same way you once did. Something inside you has slowed down enough to notice what truly matters. You have begun choosing peace over pressure, awareness over reaction, and patience over the constant need to control what happens next. And even if the path ahead still holds uncertainty, you are meeting it with a different kind of presence now. A quieter strength, a steadier heart. The kind that no longer feels the need to rush, because it understands that becoming who you are meant to be was never something that needed to be forced. It was always something that would unfold naturally, one calm step at a time. And if this moment brought a little calm to your heart, you're always welcome to subscribe to Born into Light and gently like the video so these quiet reflections can continue reaching those who may need them.